Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Strife's Sanctum. My name is Citizen Strife, and this week I'm going to talk about a game I've wanted to talk about for years. Because it's one of the best RPGs in years. And as you can see, it's Yakuza Like a Dragon. Technically the 7th in the franchise, though Yakuza 0 kind of puts it in a weird place. The way this is working is this is kind of a Dragon Quest, Dragon Warrior kind of situation. Because after a while, once they started putting Dragon Quest games into the West, they stopped calling them Dragon Warrior and they just went with the canonical thing. So Yakuza going forward after this point will be referred to as Like a Dragon. So that's not going to get confusing at all. But Yakuza 7 came off the heels of, this sort of like groundswell of critical acclaim that the series was getting at the time with Yakuza 0. And most of that had to do with the brawling concepts, and for all intents and purposes, it was a JRPG masked as a beat-em-up brawler, like a 3D brawler type game where you just beat the shit out of dudes on the street, and a GTA game set in, Kamurocho, which is a makeshift version of a real place in Tokyo. So they took basically a huge city block or something in Tokyo, kept sitting games there, and said, just go nuts. Have a GTA type setting, and then we'll just fill in the gaps. And it slowly built into something. Now, I didn't play Yakuza until 4. So most of that has to do with the games being in the West. I know that they were localized for a while. It was one of those things where most people are going to hear about it because of the Like a Dragon game or Zero. Those are the two most people mention. It is one of those things where the games get progressively better, but you're not going to get disappointed going anywhere. They've re-released a lot of the games under the Kiwami label. So Yakuza 1 and 2 have been re-released and redone, as a remaster with the current technology to fill in the story of those first couple games. And I'm sure they're going to add to it and put in 3, 4, and 5. And, 6 was still a big deal. I don't know if they localized 6. The main thing, they localized it. The main thing that really sets Like a Dragon apart is that it has an English dub. Because they only really dubbed the first one, and they had Mark Hamill, of all people, as Goro Majima. And you'll wonder, I think they brought back the same guy who did Kiryu in the first game in this game 20 years later. I might be wrong. It would be pretty funny if they did, but that would be a nice bit of continuity. But suffice it to say, they weren't trying to be as good as they are now with the dubbing. Mark Hamill aside, he's just basically playing the Joker, which is hilarious and awesome. But there is something to be said for, okay, we're getting more popularity, we're going to dub it, and we're going to choose, actors who make sense. Well, who do you go for? People who worked on Persona, because, quality people. So yes, not only is this the first one in a long time that they dubbed in English, which is good for me, because as much as I like the subtitles and I love the actors in the other games, I'm like, I can't read their text, and that's one of my main criticisms is the in-game text is bullshit, and I can't really read it. So I'm really glad that for subtitles, for the major cutscenes, they're pretty big, and they're dubbed. And it is a very good one, so I don't have to worry about that. 2, and this is the major point, as I mentioned, that Yakuza games were a brawling type game for a while. And they moved that over to Judgment for however long that sub-series is going to last. They basically added in Assassin's Creed-style infiltrations and lockpicking, chasing people down, cool stealth mechanics and junk, detective stuff. The main series turned into Dragon Quest. It's basically just that. It turned into an RPG. This game franchise had the balls to do what other games really, I don't think, ever have tried to do. Take a system that was perfect, basically, or was perfectly well established, and say, you know that game style that nobody wants to play anymore? We're gonna turn it into that. And it turned out to be their most popular and most critically acclaimed and best-selling game. I don't know if it's going to stay that way, but I would totally see why that it would. But even better, they made the main character central to that change. So they don't have Kiryu as the main character anymore. They have Ichiban Kasuga. And he is the reason that this can get away with being a turn-based game in character. And I'll explain that in a minute. So, yes, imagine my surprise when a game franchise that I liked, a couple of games in, when I showed up late to the party, was already getting buzz. And there are franchises like that. Final Fantasy is well established. Dragon Quest is well established. Star Ocean, it's been around forever, okay? Yakuza has been around forever, much like Trails, but it doesn't have the name value. It's kind of in that Trails spot where everybody who plays it knows it and likes it, or knows it well enough that everybody likes it. Yakuza is kind of in that same boat. Persona's kind of hit into that mainstream thanks to 5. Yakuza is in that position where Persona used to be. I don't know if their sales are as good, but they're going to get there someday. I think Yakuza is going to get there because they have a sense of scope and they have a sense of scale and they understand what ain't broke, don't fix it. But if we're going to try something different, we're going to try something different. And again, this kind of flies counter to my argument of the whole, should RPGs always be the same thing when, well, no, because they're going to change it. And I've said this before, Yakuza had the balls to turn into an RPG. They went into my wheelhouse rather than going away from my wheelhouse. That took some balls. And I don't know if people who were Yakuza fans are as fond of the change to an RPG system, but by and large, most people think it's an awesome idea, and it has some holes into it, but it's not like they got rid of their system. It's kind of the same way Bravely Default did their things, and again, it's weird, right? Because the people who wanted the pure brawling system still have it in a different way. So complaining about the exact same thing happening in a different thing in reverse is kind of strange. But because it was effective in that change, it kind of gets away with it where something like Final Fantasy gets derided. Because, of course, Final Fantasy is on a much larger scale than this. Yakuza can kind of take a chance. Then again, they took a chance on it and weren't sure that an RPG system would work. Now they know it does. And again, they don't have to do every single game that way, but maybe if they do every single game with Kasuga as the main character, they can get away with it. But that's because Kasuga is great. Because they decided to no longer focus on Kiryu as the main protagonist. They still have him as the face of the franchise because Kazuma Kiryu's been in every game as the main character or some amalgamation. They released a 18th or 19th century samurai epic kind of thing, basically with the Yakuza characters portraying different people, but they're for all intents and purposes ancestors or the same people. And Kiryu is the just stone-faced, super confident, above it all, but stuck in the muck of the weird shit kind of guy. He doesn't let anything faze him. Kasuga, on the other hand, is amazing. He's a fucking hilarious laugh riot because he's willing to be the butt of the joke and laugh with the joke, which is even better because you have two different types of characters that work in two different ways and can kind of splinter off into their own separate things. So if you wanted Kiryu to keep doing the brawling shit, you could. If you wanted Kasuga to stay as the RPG guy, you could. So they have different ways of doing it. But what is Kasuga's thing? What is the plot surrounding him? Well, first off, we'll just start with Kasuga himself. He's voiced by Kaiji Tang, who was the airsoft shop guy, EY in Persona 5. You should be grateful. You know, that dude. He was in a lot of other bit parts. You know, he was in the East 8 as well as kind of one of the castaways. But this was kind of that role I know him most from, you know. But it works because he gets to kind of flex his muscles because he's mostly the gruff-sounding guy, and he doesn't usually get to be the happy-go-lucky nerd idiot. But that's exactly what Kasuga is. He runs headlong into Stupidville, and he's a good-natured guy. Except he's kind of shit, right? He's the down-and-out loser type, and he was born basically in the shit. So he has nothing to his name, nothing to go on, nothing to do. Gets into a situation with some Yakuza guys, ends up pissing off the wrong people, and then invoking the name of Masami Arakawa. And we don't know who that is. We just hear that name. And eventually we realize who that is. It's his patriarch. It's his family boss. And Kasuga basically said, okay, I will stand outside until this guy recognizes me. So Masami Arakawa, you know, once they first meet, basically says, just take my finger. And it's like, he realizes that Arakawa does, that if he doesn't save this kid's life, then he looks like a piece of shit. So the Yakuza mechanics of all the stuff like take your finger if you've been disrespected, or use it as a bargaining chip, you know, show respect. Reputation is everything. Which is doubly true because Masami Arakawa is kind of a central figure to the story, both in young days. He's voiced by Johnny Young Baj, which is pretty neat, actually. But most of the game, he's voiced by George Takei. Oh my. Seriously, my head exploded that they got George Takei to voice somebody in a Yakuza game. And it just works. He has this just affable quality, this endless amount of respect. Despite being a Yakuza boss, he's just this nice guy, but he can kick your ass or do crazy stuff, you know. So he takes Kasuga under his wing, but shit happens as the game unfolds. I don't want to spoil too much, but suffice it to say, Kasuga is tasked with being the caretaker of Masato, Masami's son. And Masato is, let's see if I've got the name here. I had the list, which kind of sucks, but now I don't, so I have to look it up. And Masato Arakawa is voiced by Will Yun Lee. And Masato is basically at birth saddled with like a bunch of injuries, like a lung issue or some other thing that binds him to a wheelchair. They go to a party, shit goes south, bad things happen. Kasuga gets incarcerated to take the heat off of the family. 20 years go by and things change. So the Arakawa family, this kind of small ass branch of the Tojo clan, which is the main clan of the Yakuza series, he turns his back and goes with the Omi Alliance, which is a rival organization. Kasuga doesn't believe it, even though somebody named Adachi is telling him so. Adachi's this down and out former police detective guy. He's voiced by Andrew Morgado. I didn't know him from any other things before this, but he was in a ton of like, you know, those guys that do like a ton of like voice clips and small additional voices. He sounds like that guy. I didn't find any that was like that definitive voice until this game. But he's got that like old school, hard-boiled detective edge. But again, he's kind of a dork, in a way. He's willing to make light of stupid shit, like the fact that Kasuga goes in with a buzz cut, survives 20 years. He walks out of a barbershop. He looks for a punch perm or something like that. The lady doesn't know what the fuck it is, and he basically turns his hair into like this weird afro. So this Japanese dude has to walk around with this big giant fucking bird's nest afro around his head for the rest of, his life, because he doesn't have a lot of money, and he just kind of goes with it. What Kasuga also goes with is the fact that he likes Dragon Quest. And he likes it a lot. Because for some reason, he finds Adachi and then some other characters. They're trying to find Arakawa. Arakawa shoots him. And then they go to Ijincho, which is the new hub city in this game. So Ijincho, there was Kamurocho in most of the Yakuza games. There was Sotenbori in part of Yakuza 0, and now Ijincho, which is its own separate kind of city. Kasuga wakes up. He's been separated by Adachi for now. And he wakes up to find Yu Nanba, who's voiced by Greg Chun, who was Date in the Somnium Files and other things. So Nanba's this, again, down and out loner. He's a doctor, sort of, or was a nurse. He was a nurse, I forgot, because male nurse. It's a thing, but you forget sometimes. But basically, he gets nursed back to health by some shenanigans. That's late game bullshit. But he wakes up in Ijincho. He doesn't know what the fuck's going on. Tries to get himself back to Kamurocho, or at least try to figure out what the fuck's going on. But then they tell him, no, this is your life now. This is this city that you're in. You don't want to, rock the boat or anything like that, because they have their own problems with the Omi in here. They have their own problems with the Tojo clan that used to exist. They have their own problems with a lot of different mobsters, because you've got Japanese Yakuza, you've got Chinese triads, and you've got Korean mafia. And they're just kind of fighting amongst each other as crime goes. Kamurocho has been changed into this well-to-do utopia. Yakuza are gone, all that shit. And we don't know what the fuck's going on. So Adachi finds them, and slowly they kind of work their way back up, and they find a place of residence. They also, through plot shenanigans, end up meeting Sayako Mokoda, who was voiced by Elizabeth Maxwell, Sai Nijima from Persona 5. Mentioned again, Persona actors, good people. Anyway, so Sayako is kind of in debt to them for helping her sister out of a jam early in the game. And those are the kind of main four. There's several others in the game as the plot progresses. The idea is that everybody has their own kind of sub-story that they're trying to get through. And you can actually learn their motivations, whether in the main storyline or the sub-stories that they do, known as drink links. So you find a bar good like 20 or 30% of the way through the game, and they'll have your characters, once you do a bunch of like help stuff, like stat boosting stuff, you can go meet with them and, talk for them for 5 or 10 minutes and just chat. It's basically a social link mechanic. And that opens up new jobs for those characters. And one of the keys to this battle system is the job system, the job classes. So while you're going around learning about the main plot and why all the Yakuza are kind of screwing around Ijincho and all this junk, Kasuga is under this delusion that he's this hero. And then everybody around him, these people that are just, minding their own business, they're either homeless people, they're Yakuza thugs, they're well-to-do people that are doing bad things or whatever the fuck. whenever he fights them, it does the fight transition and they transform in his head. Nobody else notices this. This bat that he has, this weird golden bat that he has, is turned into a sword. Well, not into a sword, but he thinks it's a sword, basically. This hero's bat. So he thinks it's Dragon Quest. So he wants to become a hero. He realizes he's on the outs with the Yakuza and says, I'm going to be a hero. So I'm going to do it. And he and his merry band do stuff around the city. Whether it's stopping crimes, figuring out the Yakuza bullshit, going around doing things. And that's the cool thing about Yakuza is they still have their GTA roots. So it is an open world game and it still has a story that you can follow and do that. But every once in a while, you can kind of walk around and do stuff. You can fight dudes for side quests. You can go Dragon karting. You can go mini golfing. You can go to a batting cage. You can do all manner of things. This was a franchise that made playing with little RC rocket cars an amazing thing. And a life or death struggle. You watch those little zippy things around the racetrack and Kiryu goes, no! They make it a sub-story. And speaking of sub-stories, they're the best part of the game. I haven't even gotten to the combat yet. I tried, but I gotta mention the sub-stories. Because you've got your main plot line, which you can do if you want, but you're missing the fun. The thing about Yakuza, and the thing that makes it so great, is that it does not take itself seriously at all. It has its serious storyline of betrayal and friendship and, people banding together with or without the Yakuza and, turf wars and all this gang warfare shit. Very serious stuff. And it's a good storyline. But every chapter or so, you can go around and you can talk to a guy about not feeling pain. His name is Mr. Masochist. So Kasuga tries to find ways to make him feel pain. So in a separate storyline, he finds the dominatrix lady who's being bullied by her younger co-workers. So they meet up and the dominatrix slaps the dude, and then that's what causes him to feel pain as they kind of coexist. And Kasuga is just like, well, that works. You got another guy walks out of a soap land. He lost his clothes. Can't go back in, so you have to basically navigate through a series of hoses that are spraying water everywhere. And if the water gets on the dude's body, then, well, he's open for everyone to see. In Japan, that's probably a terrible thing. Then there's another one of this kid trying to find his mom's trying to buy him a baseball glove, but some guy steals it. So Kasuga just says, all right, I'm going to kick the shit out of you. So it ranges from the absurd to the absolutely fun. There's a public pisser. You find out which guy's a public pisser and you beat the shit out of him and it's done. So you do it. And part of the fun is that Kasuga is in on the joke. He's a serious-minded guy, but he's not like Kiryu in the sense that Kiryu is very stoic and, not gruff serious. He's willing to laugh at himself, do the absurdity, but there's always this kind of like, this guy's too good for this. Kasuga is willing to be the butt of the joke. He's willing to put on a mascot costume and look stupid. He's willing to think that everything is Dragon Quest. He's willing to take a look at this weird scientist guy in this random building who's collecting data on weird guys who flash people and think, this is totally a Pokemon reference. I'm cool with this. And that's totally normal. Let's help this guy out because we'll get rewards and shit. Because rewards are awesome, guys. Because he's thinking of life as a Dragon Quest character. He's the self-insert player character, but he's playing out his own character, which it just works. So you've got the Super Series storyline added in with the crazy side questing stuff, including managing and running a goddamn business, a real estate management minigame. For whatever reason, this character is, this character Eri Kamataki is just down and out, is going to get help from the people that, Kasuga's group knew. And then Kasuga volunteers, having no real estate experience, to run a real estate organization and a business management sim. I was confusing the real estate management for Yakuza 0 with the business management sim. It's different things, but Kiryu does real estate management with no prior real estate management experience in Yakuza 0. Kasuga does business management sim, and it's a total fucking sim, too. You get these little, tickers, these stock tickers, you're making money, you're making money, you're making money. These little, fucking Minecraft-looking pixel guy of Kasuga with his dumbass hairdo is running across the screen collecting money. It's just fucking great. So both, you can see why I got confused. It's they're willing to have these absolute nobodies run businesses and somehow manage them practically perfectly. Again, this game is willing to go into places and do weird ass shit, and it's great and it's glorious. How he's able to run a crazy business to the top of the food chain while still finding the whole Masami Arakawa business and figuring out who is doing what in a Jinsho, you just kind of have to, much like any side quest, you just have to kind of suspend disbelief and say, none of this takes time. We just make $3 million running every 3 or 4 months, running a successful business, and it only takes us about an hour. Never mind. But again, you can do these side quests and then get back to the main story, because all of those things kind of feed into each other, because the stupid shit makes up for the super serious shit, but the super serious shit makes up for all the stupid shit that you're looking at going, does that make any sense? I don't fucking know. It's Yakuza. Let's fucking go, And it's okay, so you get to do shit like that. He gets to manage a business, and one of his employees is a fucking chicken. It's it's a chicken named Omelet. Because of course. Because why not? It's a rooster or a hen or a chicken. I don't fucking know. It's a chicken. It's a giant freaking chicken as an employee in one of your businesses. I don't fucking care. This game is great. So, about that battle system I was talking about. Kasuga transforms into this hero. And it basically becomes Dragon Quest. It's a turn-based game. You got your skills, you got your setup, you got your stuff. And after a while, everybody in your party can switch into different classes. So you've got your standard hero classes. You've got your ass-kicking classes like bodyguard or foreman or whatever. It's basically the same classes you would know from a Dragon Quest or a Final Fantasy game, redone under modern sensibilities. So your dancer isn't a dancer. He's a breaker. He's a break dancer. So he wears the breaker cap and he does the windmill dances and he does AoE damage, or the gambler becomes the dealer instead. Your healers are Nanba's main class, which is homeless bum. Or you can have the two female characters be an actual idol, right? So the healing class is that of an idol. Kasuga can kind of fit in any mold, right? And the paladin is a bit of everything. Buffer, healer, just damage dealer class. So you have all these cool ideas as these modern classes, construction worker, foreman, right? He wields a giant fucking hammer. Stuff like that, right? And it's a cool twist on the tale, because it is the knight, bodyguard, dancer, breaker, dealer, gambler, that sort of thing. It works. So everything makes sense. The battles make sense. You do your normal attacks. It fits kind of in that persona weakness kind of scheme. Not so much the press turn mechanic or the one more mechanic. The way that Yakuza does their weakness system is it still has the blunt/pierce of, say, Persona 3, but it has its own, elemental damage system. And the higher damage output you get from the better weapons that you buy in a certain element will work against certain enemies. So, for instance, if you have a character who's strong against punches, you don't want to be punching them. But they could be severely weak to electricity. So if you've got somebody with an electric weapon or an electric skill, you can do that. Some classes specialize in elemental damage or a certain damage type, like a bodyguard will do slashing. Little things like that. And certain weapons can even cause stuff like bleed or poison or electric shock and paralyze or even charm. Some of the skills can even do that. So you can force enemies to lose turns. One of the weirder things about the system is how the enemies move. The characters move too, but the enemies always kind of move around and in and out and stuff. It's kind of Chrono Trigger-esque, but in a 3D environment. So if you're trying to set up like an AoE or something, the enemies can go out of the range and it screws up your AoE. But if you can get them right, then it can really do some serious damage. So you have to weigh the benefits of using an AoE versus just attacking normally. And eventually you'll realize that certain skills just don't add up. And there's almost way too many. But then you remember that, okay, if you screw up or whatever and you run out of MP, then after battles, well, you can gain a level up from a level up and from a class level up too. So you have two chances to level up and get a full heal. You can also heal by just grabbing food at a diner, So there's ways to get around things without using a lot of items if you know what you're doing. But there's a lot of experimentation that you can do. So it's not feeling like you're getting stuck or sucked into a thing. So there's just a lot of variability in the system. I will say it has some warts to it. The characters will kind of get stuck behind a pole or behind some walls every once in a while, and they'll have to kick a bench or have to walk around a bench, just little things like that. You'll get stuck, or a character will get run over by a car by accident and take a lot of damage. Kasuga dies, and then the game is over. It's that Persona 3 through 5 thing again. It's really, I hate that. But, just little things. But the system is pure RPG. And once you've done a turn-based game like this, you feel like you're at home. And that's why people love it, is because you're taking the Yakuza stupidity and fun, adding in the serious stuff in the storyline, which can be very serious, throw in a big chunk of the cameo stuff and a lot of the cool Yakuza ephemera that you may or may not recognize or notice, character-wise or visuals-wise or place-wise or whatever. And then you add in the RPG system, you add in the dub actors, and you add in a whole bunch of cool stuff, and it becomes an amazing experience. Not much to write home about the music department. I was not really bowled over. A lot of the game is ambient noise. There's some fight music, I think the boss music is pretty nice, but it's nothing I'm like going out of my way to suggest. This is not one of those types of games where the music can really hold your attention. But it's nothing that I hate either. But the stories and the characters are great. The sub-stories are probably the best part of the game because you get to see things that you were thinking, this makes no goddamn sense and I don't fucking care. Because this is so hilarious, I'm enjoying it. Even the business management sim. I said real estate, I got confused before. But the business management sim, this guy who has no business management experience is tasked with making money. This is your money-making game. And it's like, oh, okay. So how do you save money in the game? Well, you put money in an ATM to save it if you lose in battle. You don't really lose a lot of progress. You mostly just lose your money. But yeah, losing boss fights does suck still. But again, there are ways around it. If you've ever played a Dragon Quest system and know how the Dragon Quest system works, well, you know how this system kind of works. So you're in a good place. As far as little issues, I would say some of some of the absurdity gets so absurd, it's almost like, I mean, there's almost too much to do. But again, I was not big into the whole, like, I'm good into the real estate and the business management from the last two games, but there was also hostess management in Yakuza 0, which was also a cool minigame. They put in a lot of effort into those games, which is really good. But then you forget that the game is trying to be super serious too, so it's a clash of styles. If you're focused in on the story bits, you'll forget that there's all that crazy fun shit. So it's kind of a dichotomy. Do you want to focus in on the story at the loss of the sub-stories? But do you want to take all the time to do the social stuff, forget about the story for an hour to 2 hours, and then forget all the serious shit that was going on? Because it's a conflict of interest. That's kind of what Persona does too, in a way. Is the side story stuff may get in the way of the story people. Like, if you're a pure story, you're gonna miss what makes Yakuza so much fun. So it's a lot of this game is kind of gearing you to play the sub-stories, but if you're not really into a sub-story thing, you kind of miss the fun of it. Because this isn't like those games where the sub-stories just net you stuff. These sub-stories are fun because they're fun experiences and absurd experiences. They aren't just go here, kill a guy. They're go here, kill a guy because the dude with bubbles needs to get his ass home. There's a mini game with Kasuga where he's falling asleep and these weird sheep dudes are trying to have him fall asleep during a movie, right? It's just weird, stupid shit that makes no sense. But because Yakuza and its creators are willing to have fun with it, you really need to go out of your way to experience these sub-stories. I haven't even mentioned the pound mate system. A lot of the sub-stories give you pound mates, which are the summons. So, as in a modern setting, Kasuga's got a smartphone. He types in this person, and it could be a character from an old Yakuza game, or it could be a new character you were helping. And it could be this person who was a biker who, revs around the people and sets them on fire. Could be this dude who has these freaking iron ball maces as hands and he beats the shit out of dudes. So it costs some money to summon dudes, but they do a shit ton of damage. And that's part of the fun. The summon mechanics are amazing. So everything kind of feeds in on itself. But at its core, the battle system does have some niggles. Getting stuck behind benches and weird shit that happens. A weird difficulty spike. Not even midway, like 80% of the way through the game happens and you're not prepared for it. So you have to basically go from like level 30 or 35 to 55 or so to have any chance to beat that fight. If you're not aware of it, you get screwed over. Because when you see what that fight is, you will know why you're supposed to level so fucking high. The game does not tell you you're supposed to. You just learn that you're supposed to. Same thing with the final boss. I won't say who the final boss is, but you need a certain mechanic in Yakuza's hero arsenal to avoid a potential instant death. There's no other way around it because there's no like homunculi items. There's no like push the dude out of the way and take the damage. No. Kasuga gets hit with that thing, he's dead, you lose. And that fight sucks because you're going to be like level 60 or 70. I did not know that until I fought the guy. And, oh, okay. So I could spend the whole game fighting as a breaker class, not realizing I had to be in a hero class to level 16 because I needed that fucking instant death avoidance thing. Well, great on you, game. I wish I'd known that before I'd spent time in a system that allowed me to do what I wanted to do, only to be told, nah, you kind of need that. It's not as egregious as Final Fantasy III, where it basically kind of forces you, despite hinting you down the path near the end, to get the thing you need. But it's also not as free-flowing as you'd think. But that is the only real instance of the game kind of soft-locking you into that sort of situation. So other than you have to get level 16 in his default class you're allowed to do what you really want to do, and it's for the final boss. So okay, it's annoying, but it's there. So really, Yakuza Like a Dragon is a bunch of fun stuff and some minor niggles with the new release of the new battle system. So it's like, if you're into the beat 'em up style, there's still the Judgment games, Judgment and Lost Judgment. I think all of the other side off stuff, like I know there's Like a Dragon Ishin. I know that they're going to do like a DLC or a separate game to kind of explain Kiryu's absence from Yakuza 6 into Like a Dragon, because you're focusing on Kasuga this time. So what is he doing in these like 2 or 3 intervening years? I don't know if that's going to be a battle, it's going to be a brawler system, or it's going to be an RPG. I know that they're making Yakuza 8, and it's probably going to stay with a JRPG mindset. But Yakuza on the whole is a franchise that, like I said, is slowly starting to get that critical acclaim, and because it's a smaller scale game, it doesn't have to, sell the crazy amount of numbers that a Final Fantasy has to do to succeed. It can succeed kind of the way it's doing it, kind of the way that Persona was surviving for a long time until it hit big. And, big is a relative term, but still, Yakuza Like a Dragon and Like a Dragon going forward is in its best place. It has a lot of notoriety now because a lot of people, when I was streaming it, were like, I've never played this. I need to play this. It may not be the highest profile game, but it's something that everybody looks at and goes, holy shit, this is amazing. Why have I not heard of this? It's kind of the same way Ys is kind of like, it's been around forever, but because it's only, kind of hitting into the West recently, that's why people around America finally are starting to notice it. That being said, it is a lot like Persona in the sense that it is trying to sell you Japan. So this is going to be for that kind of vibe. It's still going to tell its story. I think compared to Persona, which is a lot of like younger characters doing in-game stuff, like a lot of Japanese-ness, this comes across as older people doing cooler stuff. One of my favorite things about Yakuza is that it focuses on people in their 30s, in their 40s, in their 50s, even Adachi in their 60s. Some characters in their 70s. This is a game that harkens back to the time when RPGs used to focus on the people in their 20s and 30s as main characters as opposed to teenagers. So it has a different mindset. It has people who have jobs, who have lives, who have these things. It's in a modern urban setting, so people are just minding their own business. This is not some amazing quest to save a crystal and save a princess and whatever. It's, I'm beating up dudes in a tower because they're Yakuza guys in a fucking mansion, right? It's cool, urban, modern stuff with the old school trappings of a game that you recognize. The style you'll immediately recognize if you played any Dragon Quest, any Final Fantasy, any Persona. And even if you just wanted to play the brawling games, you could still find an amazing experience from Yakuza 0. That's the other game that everybody loves, because I like this one because it's dubbed and dubbed really well, so it's easier for me to dive into it. But there's no reason you can't get into Yakuza at all. The Kiwami games, the new Ishin game, 0, or this one, or any game coming after. This series is on a high. And I would highly recommend, if you're not played these games at all, you might want to start. But that'll do it for me today. Yakuza's done. I'm a happy guy. I'm going to do a review on more Yakuza games going forward, eventually, someday soon. But I've got games and RPGs and other things listed as far as reviews going until May. I've already put in my list of stuff for Mega Man, and I think it's going to be Mega Man 1 and the powered up add-on, Mega Man X2, because I've already done X1, Mega Man Legends, Mega Man Battle Network. So that'll be May. and I'm pretty much set for a long time because this is going to get released either late March or early April. I'm not sure when, but that'll do it for me. I've got a lot of stuff to look forward to, and so do you guys. So I'll see you guys next time. Citizen Strife signing off.